So my daily driver, I mean literally the car that I use pretty much every day, actually I don't drive it very much, but when I do drive a car, it's this one. It's an Infiniti Q60 Red Sport. It's the only car I own. I traded my Audi S5 that you've seen a few times on the channel for this car here. It is faster, it's more reliable, comes with a way better warranty, and in my opinion it looks a bit better as well. It looks a little more Japanese, and I've always had a thing for JDM. So we're gonna do some JDM things to this car today. I am going to specifically be replacing the factory exhaust system with something that's going to be a bit more, well, I should say a bit less restrictive.
If you're rocking the Windows 10 operating system and haven't activated your copy, click the link below and purchase an OEM license from SCD Key. Then click here, 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 and then here. Paste your activation key and you'll have a fully activated OS in seconds. And be sure to use my offer code SStudio for an 18% discount on your order.
So what I've been doing lately, the solution that was pretty cost effective at the time was to just delete the muffler. This is the factory muffler in this car, and it literally silences the car. So it doesn't really make sense to me to have a 400 plus horsepower car and it not make any noise at all. You can see those are my stock lower catalytic converters, and I have gotten rid of those. I have lower downpipes, basically just larger diameter pipes that bypass the lower cat, so less restrictive. The exhaust that we're going to be installing today is going to do a similar thing. It's going to free up some of that restriction on the exhaust side of this car. And the reason why that is important is because when you have the turbos spooling, right, you get that extra air pulled in, that's forced induction, you got to get rid of that exhaust. You're going to be building more exhaust as the turbos spool more, because exhaust is what drives the turbos, right? You have all that extra exhaust being flushed out the back. But if this part here, if these pipes that allow the gas to, you know, exit the car from the rear, sorry about the cars driving by, I can't really control that, instead of just being dumped underneath the car, right? Because that wouldn't be good for the wiring and whatever plastic panels you might have under there. If this is restrictive, then you're going to have back pressure preventing those turbos from running as efficiently as they probably should. So the exhaust, you can see here, this is the pretty much everything. This is an exhaust from Stillen. It's a catback exhaust, and that means that from the catalytic converters back, you're replacing the entire thing. So you're not replacing the catalytic converters themselves. You could have your stock cats and then have a catback, and that's perfectly fine. A lot of people do that, but in my case, because there are two sets of catalytic converters on each side, I wanted to at least delete one of those on each side to free up some of that back pressure and prevent those turbos from feeling super restricted. I like to use this analogy here. So let's use this, right? This is like a really big pipe. This is actually our mid pipe. It's a 3-inch, should be a 3-inch pipe. If you use like a straw, okay? If you put a straw in your mouth and you try to breathe through it, it's really tough, right? Your body needs a certain amount of oxygen to perform at spec, right? Or you're going to feel sluggish, you might not get enough oxygen, you might kill yourself. So don't try it. But you know what I'm talking about, right? So having a larger straw allows you to pull in more air. First off, that's not what exhausts do, but it also allows you to exhale carbon dioxide, right? More efficiently, because you have a wider volume for that carbon dioxide to flow through. And that is what exhaust systems do. They get rid of that back pressure, unwanted back pressure, I should say, from the catalytic converters, really from the turbos, back to the end of the car. So yeah, first thing we're going to do is jack up the back of the car. Remember, you always want to keep your car in park. That's pretty obvious. If you have a manual, then pull that e-brake really hard. You want to pull your e-brake anyway in these cars, just for redundancy's sake. And yeah, so I'm going to jack it up. I actually have ramps, but I don't like driving on the ramps because the car's too low. So what I'm going to do is lift the car up high enough to where we can slide the ramps underneath the back tires. These are actually just narrow enough to fit. These are 285s at the rear. And then we're going to set the car on the ramps, and then we can work pretty much from the mid of the car back. The lower downpipes stop at about the front of the door, so it's going to be kind of difficult to get up there. So we'll see. I might have to lift the front of the car at one point. This is what happens when you try to do this without lifting the entire car. So we're going to lift the back of the car from the rear diff. I should just say diff because this isn't an all-wheel drive variant of the Q60. But this is a factory recommended lift point. So that's where we're going to start. And then of course we'll slide the ramps underneath the left and right tires once the car is lifted high enough. Don't get under your car with just this jack underneath there. These are not jack stands. This is a hydraulic lift, yeah? So be careful with that. Always have something else on either side. That's why I have the ramps. You could use jack stands, whatever you want. Just make sure you have redundancy. I'm still going to keep this up just in case. you never know. So, you know, you're working. This is essentially life or death here. Car could fall on your face. It'll kill you. So, all right, it's high enough. I think I can get all the way to the front, although it's gonna be really tight getting the piping up there as well. I'm a pretty skinny guy, so we'll see if we can get it to work way up there. But the back for sure, we can definitely replace this stuff back here. You don't wanna tighten everything until you have it all in place. Then you can tighten from the front, closer to the engine, to the back. So I'm gonna start removing from the back first, and this is just because it's gonna be easier for me to film this way. You're gonna need a 14 mil socket to get the, well, what would be a factory stock muffler assembly. I just have 2 straight pipes here. So it's like an axle back exhaust, if you want to call it that. So yeah, start with a 14 mil socket. You might need a swivel extension, something like this maybe. I use a smaller one like this because it's hard to get, especially in those really tight spaces like on this side here. You can see how small that opening is, that gap is. So coming straight on isn't really going to be an option for that one. But they're all 414. I'm not sure if that's the case for the entire exhaust system because I've not really worked in the middle. But yeah, 14 for the start. All right, so axle back is removed. Now we have the mid piping, and we have a brace here. This is actually just a frame brace. Kind of keeps both sides of the car a little more rigid. So we have to remove that. I believe it's 12 mil. I think it's a 12 millimeter socket for these. And then we have, you can see, I know, I'm sorry that this is like a really awkward shot. I don't have the car fully lifted. But that right there, see how that's one big pipe, right? That kind of splits into 2. So that is the Y pipe. And you can see why it's called the Y pipe. It looks like the letter Y. And both sides here, this side connects to the passenger side lower down pipe. That side connects to the driver's side lower down pipe. And so we're going to be replacing literally everything from these connections to the back of the car. All right, so yeah, these are definitely 12 mil, and thankfully, pretty easy to get off. I didn't have to get my breaker bar. I don't even know how I would have gotten a breaker bar underneath this car. This really needs to be lifted higher, but I've worked on this car this low before, so just do what makes you comfortable. Also, again, I apologize for the awkward camera angles. Trying to get that one now. I have no idea if I'm pointing in the right direction. I'm just going to assume that I am. All right, and we have 2 more on the other side. All right, I can already tell you from looking at these 2, we're going to need some of that good juice to spray on these to get them to break. Also, going to need kind of a deep socket. I don't have deep sockets. I don't think the ones that I have will fit, so we might have to use some good old-fashioned wrenches. And I think I'm going to lose some torque in the process. Let's see. All right, I'm not going to tell you how long it took to get this thing off of the hangers, which were welded to the frame, so it's not like I could just unscrew the hangers. It was an embarrassingly long amount of time. Finally, it's off though. This back chunk of pipe is actually from my brother's Mustang 5.0, so that's not even for this car. But you can see here, we've got the two resonators, one on each side. You can see how small the piping is. Like, it's I think right at 1.5 inches or 2 inches. Very restrictive for a factory exhaust. You see that's the Y pipe there at the base. And then this is what you would call the mid pipe. So we're going to replace this entire set along with the muffler config with the catback Stillen exhaust. So we're going to start first with the Y pipe. This is going to be closest to the engine, to the front of the car. And you can see they actually broke this down into 2 separate pieces. Normally this would be one big piece like the factory unit, but they broke it down because they wanted to consolidate it right for packaging. So that's why that second pipe there is not, you know, one solid piece. So typically with exhaust systems, you want everything, you know, you want as few welds or as few, you know, connections as possible. This one here, I think only has 3-4 connections, so it's not too bad. This is, you know, pretty typical. But yeah, all right, let's start with the Y pipe. All right, next up are the exhaust tips. These are just polished chrome. I didn't want to go with the burnt tips like I had in my S5, and they have carbon fiber ones as well, but the silver looks a bit more traditional, and we've got these clamps here that will keep them secured. Cool thing about these is you can adjust each, right? So if you want, you know, one of these is like naturally just kind of pressed into the car a bit more, you can pull it out a bit and still tighten it, and it'll be good to go. So yeah, that's just perks of going with something like this versus the really cheap setup I had before. You can see the tips were kind of welded into the little straight pipe, little axle back on each side. And so as a result, this one actually poked out a little bit more from the car, and that's overexposed. But anyway, you see what I'm trying to say. Like, it was sticking out a bit more, and I didn't like that. So you get more versatility, a bit more customizable when you get the full exhaust setup here, or at least something that comes with tips. So I recommend that if you are kind of a, I don't know, a control freak and you like to have everything perfect, you can definitely fine tune things with those tips to make them look nice and pretty and flush with your car. These are the instructions, by the way. They're pretty good from Stillen. I'd like more pictures though. I know it looks like they have a picture for every instruction, but sometimes it's a bit difficult to figure out which clamp they're using for which set of piping, which connection. So only issue that I've really run into so far, I had to swap this one out for a regular clamp at one point in the exhaust. But yeah, she's almost done. And then we're gonna tighten everything up starting from the front, working our way to the back. So that was an exhaust install. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. This is Science Studio. Thanks for modding with us. Need to watch the road.